And joining us now, you can catch him on the Yards Per Attempt podcast. He's also bigwig over there at SiriusXM. My boss at SiriusXM, Eddie Borsilli. How you doing?
Guys, it's a pleasure to be on here. I've enjoyed your work from afar from a while, so let's talk some Raider football, man. I'm pumped.
Perfect. Yeah, we're like that chick that's good from afar but far from good. We're usually best enjoyed from a distance, but now that you're in and you're seeing how the sausage is made, we'll see if you're still a fan.
You're still a fan of the sausage.
Everybody's a fan of little sausage.
Yeah, why not?
So here we are, 67 days away from opening day. Not that anyone's counting. Your expectations, general expectations for this season, because you look at the AFC West and on paper, best division in football, right? When like Derek Carr, who's like top 12-ish best quarterback, is like arguably the worst quarterback in the division, like you're sitting pretty. But there's just so many question marks surrounding so many of these teams. Like Russell Wilson's still the same guy. Can that defense without Fangio be successful in Denver? Brandon Staley, I think, is going to continue to like ruin that great Chargers roster.
Yeah.
And then Kansas City without Tyreek Hill, with losing some defensive players to cap space, and then of course the Raiders. Let's be honest, 2 decades of incompetence. Can that be turned around right now? I mean, what are your like general expectations for the Raiders in the AFC West?
So I liken it. Look, on paper, I think it's the best division in football, right? I think you have every single possible thing from every single team in the division. You have higher powered offense, just like you said. You have good defenses. I kind of likened it to the NFC East back in the day when those teams just went against each other and kind of just kicked each other's butts all up and down the football field. And the division winner was 9-7 or 10-6 at best. Look, we've all seen these teams play. I think the Chiefs and their offense will be probably okay later in the year. It's going to take some adapting without Tyreek Hill. They still got guys. They still got Travis Kelce. They still got guys going to stretch the field. The Russell Wilson thing, I think if the teams in the AFC West withstand the Russell Wilson barrage, and when I said Russell, when they do the let Russ cook thing, it's like 6 to 8 weeks when this dude is the best quarterback and the best player in the league, and then it kind of just dips a little bit. So I think the Denver situation probably scares me a little bit because we all seen the Chargers. The Chargers, no matter how good they are, think about the Chargers years back, 14-2 record. They get knocked out in the first round of play. They're always going to find ways to kick themselves in the ass and knock themselves out. So I think on paper, it's the best division, hands down. I think every single game in the AFC West is going to be knock them down, drag out, high scoring. You want to say old school AFL type deal. But the Raiders, to me, took that step last year, guys, when they proved when there was a million different things thrown at them, the rug situation, the Gruden thing, everything. The core of this team is back. You add in guys like Devontae Adams and stuff. I just think you mentioned it before, RJ, 20 years of this team being just so bad and so inept in so many ways, and they finally crossed that bridge. I think that really proved to this core group of players that this team can get over the hump, that they could be a playoff team year in and out. And we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a long season, like you said, to play in the first preseason game. But to me, on paper, the AFC West is just stupid loaded. It's going to be a battle all year long.
Yeah, it's weird with the Raiders. Like the like ESPN and like PFF came out with their like rankings of the roster, like just rankings of the roster, not predicting their record, not predicting where they finish. It's just like ranking the roster. And they had the Raiders at 21st or 23rd, yeah. Like 21, right?
Yeah, 21.
21. And I'm like, you know what? I can't. It's hard for me to argue that because
Makes
just
sense.
pure player by player, it's not a great roster. But because it's the beauty of football, it's the ultimate team sport. Like when the Raiders went on their 4-game win streak to close out last season, they beat every single one of those 4 teams was more talented than them.
Yep.
The Chargers are more talented than the Raiders at almost every single position, minus like tight end and kicker, right?
That's what I mean.
And yet we still beat them, right? I think there's like something special in the water in Las Vegas that really came to fruition last season. And now it's a matter of, can that continue, right? Was that Rich Bisaccia like loving these guys' success? Was it Derek Carr being a leader? Was it the entire team being a leader? Were they rallying around all the adversity that they had to handle over this season? Is that what drove them? Like, I don't know what it is, Eddie, but I hope it continues, whatever that intangible. In the podcast, you can't see me moving my hands, but it's this intangible like thing that willed them to success.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent too of teams in sports getting hot at the right time. It's not like you said. It's not always the most talented team, but it's the team that goes on the winning streak to end the year that really gets momentum. The Raiders kind of proved that last year. The Raiders are going to have to prove it. The people are going to doubt them. I was talking to someone earlier today, and they're like, the Raider over/under set at 8.5. I believe the 8.5 because the Raiders haven't proved to anybody besides last year that they could win consistently, win double-digit games. So I think that's a fair number, especially in this division. But I agree. I think there's something special, Brian. If you get those core guys to buy in, Carr, Waller, guys along the offensive line, some of the guys on the defense to buy in and say, this is what we do now. We're not the old Raiders. We're not the team that gets kicked down and we go down. We're matching up a team in the first half and it's 21-21 and we give up a long run and it breaks our back and we lose by 37. Like that those days need to be over. It needs to be moved past it. And I think the secret sauce could possibly be Josh McDaniels. I've seen a guy in my time in the league, when he had his first crack at it, he was not obviously mature enough. It was a little bit too big for him. He tried to come in there and change things around and trade dudes and be like, I'm the man here. You could do it. I think he's matured in a sense to know what he has in this roster. He could have had a pick of any litter of teams around it. He could have the Colts job. He could have had any pick of the litter of teams, and he chose to come here. He chose to come here for Derek Carr. He chose to come here for this roster. They didn't know they were getting Devontae Adams at the time. So I think if you marry up what they did last year.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. If you marry the two things up with Josh McDaniels and he doesn't try to be Bill Belichick, I think you get something special here. And you're going to get it right in Derek Carr's prime and right in the spot where this team needs to be hitting on all cylinders.
That was my big thing I'm a lot more optimistic than my two cohorts here with Rory, who isn't here, and RJ. I'm like, look, I've been there myself where I've been in leadership positions and maybe I wasn't ready yet. And, even though my instruction was sound, maybe my dealing with the individual wasn't as good. And I alienated some people because of that. And I also said that his second time around, McDaniel's second time around as a coordinator in New England, he's looking at that. He's looking at Bill Belichick up close, but from a head coach's eyes. Okay, now he can appreciate a little bit different that dynamic of how he deals with players, how he deals with his coaches, because he's been there before. I have a lot of high expectations for McDaniels and this offense. And I think that the only reason why we're 21st ranked right now is what you said. We have a lot of unproven players. We have a lot of high-end players in certain positions across the board, but there's a lot of prove-it guys out there. There's a couple of guys at linebacker that are prove-it guys. There's pretty much our damn near whole secondary that's prove-it guys. A lot of guys along the offensive line who are prove-it guys, but once they go out there and they show that they're solid players, that can be high teens easy.
It almost, guys, it almost doesn't make sense if you think about it, the way this team is kind of built. And you look at the 2019 draft class and you have obviously Max Crosby and Hunter Renfrow and guys like that are studs. But you could really say on the paper that the first round picks, were just guys. They were just guys that maybe aren't going to get a second contract with this team. And then you have a 2020 draft of 2 first-round picks that are not even in the league anymore. One dude's killed somebody. I mean, it's a total teams. That's why last year's playoff run can't be undersold, because you had so much adversity, and then the head coach stuff. You have drafts where you don't hit on any of your players. You missed on basically five first-round picks. I know Josh Jacobs could do some things, and he could be a good player sometimes. But as of right now, you basically missed on 5 first-round picks, and you still had a team that was built to go to the playoffs. So that's why, last year didn't make much sense. And to me, if I was a Josh McDaniels going in there and saying, guys, you had no business being in the playoffs last year of what this roster was made of. Now let me come in here. Let me bring some of my guys in here. Let me bring in the best receiver in the National Football League in Devontae Adams. And I think you're kind of, cooking with gas a little bit. But it's really on the surface, on paper, Josh McDaniels walking in, there had to be a reason why he took this job after all the crap that this team has been through the past 20 years, and especially the past 2 years when it comes to roster building.
I couldn't when I have my solo shows, I get into I have to calm myself down when people say, well, you know what, you hit on some draft picks and you miss. And if you miss on a first rounder and you get a 5th rounder, that's fine. I'm like, no. You have to keep that first rounder on your roster because of how much money. You don't have to keep a 4th rounder on your roster if he doesn't pan out.
No,
the first rounder you do because you owe him so much money. It's
one thing too. In the 2019 guys, we talk about Jacobs and Abram and Clelin Ferrell that are still on this team, and they still could have good years this year and earn second contracts. Again, Henry Ruggs and Damon Arnette were probably two of the biggest, the Ruggs situation is what it is, but probably two of the worst draft picks in the history of the National Football League. Like, we're going to be sitting here as old men in 20 years and saying, wow, can you remember those guys, like how bad those situations turned out? And it's still like, yes, Max Crosby, Alec Ingold were good players. Hunter Renfrow is awesome. But if you hit on two of those guys, if you drafted Devin White over Clelin Ferrell, if you drafted Montez Sweat over Jonathan Abram, something like that, if you hit on two of those studs, think about where this team would be now. You had a playoff team last year. Think about if you had those types of players on the rosters. It's frustrating at times, but it's also fulfilling to say, like, hey, that's why this team was a playoff team last year and why Josh McDaniels took over.
Clelin Ferrell's getting $8 million next
That's
year.
fucking nuts, man.
Yeah, but
So
he didn't pick himself, RJ. He didn't pick himself.
I can still hate him. I
know.
I am holding my right to hate Clelin Ferrell for taking $8 million of my money. I feel like it's my money, that salary cap.
I'm not hating the player. I'm hating his game. That's what I'm doing.
Let's hate Mike Mayock for taking not trading back and taking him at 4. But
look, you know what? So he had a trade in place that the team backed out, and then he had a second team that he feel wasn't enough value. I said, motherfucker, who cares at this point? He's still going to be there in the early teens. Who cares if they give you a 5th along with the 1st? You're still getting more, and it's like, oh my, you don't have to pay him as much.
It's easy to say hindsight's 2020, but Devin White was always my guy. Think about that dude in silver and black wrecking people right now.
That's what's most frustrating about these round 1 whiffs. It wasn't like it's Baker Mayfield where everyone thought he'd be good and it just didn't pan out, right? It was like Damon Arnette, like he wasn't even the third best DB on his
corner on his team,
right? It's
like at that point, just skip the pick and be like, all right, we'll take it. Like you pick ahead of us, and we'll come back. Like
take them all
full of Vikings. Like wait,
I'll take you inside a little bit because RJ knows I worked for NFL radio for a long time, so I produced a lot of drafts. So I would always have the earpiece in my ear and hear the pick before I came on to make sure that everybody was in line. There were 2 times I wanted to throw my headset. One was Darius Hayward-Bay, who I know turned out to have a decent career, but Darius Hayward-Bay and Damon Arnette were 2 times where I literally wanted to take my headset and just launch it into space and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Someone please come in and fill in for me because I can't take this no more.
That was Jonathan Abram for me. I'm like, wait a second. If we would have drafted him 15 years earlier, he would have been a prototypical safety in the NFL. I said, he's not that type of safety that, he's not a cover safety. Like that's what you need out of a safety. Yeah. He's basically a run stuffing corner is what safeties are nowadays.
Yeah, I know. Sorry to bring up bad memories here, boys.
Let's get some good stuff.
So my chest.
The players we did draft well, right? Derek Carr just got another extension this year. Hunter Renfrow got an extension. Max Crosby got an extension. The only core guy that hasn't is Darren Waller. 2 years left, no guaranteed money. He'll be the 17th highest paid tight end next season. Where are you on Waller? Are you extend him now for the respect? Are you nah, let's wait, middle ground somewhere? What should the Raiders do with Darren Waller right now, July 2022?
See, I think it's a different type of situation with Darren Waller because Waller's story was so dynamic and so, kind of out of left field. He was, basically on the Ravens practice squad. The Raiders kind of saw him and said, this guy could be a stud. He obviously had his addiction problems. And they came to him. It's not like this is his first, contract extension. The Raiders took care of him when he showed that he could play well. And I understand that's not the business. I don't think, and Waller's camp is probably pushing for it, but he is coming off a season where he missed some time. He battled some injuries. I think if he goes into this year and Dave Ziegler says, hey, operate in good faith here. And I understand how hard that is for NFL players because they had one injury and they're kind of screwed. But he's one of the best players on this roster. He's one of the best tight ends in the National Football League. There were times last year when I kind of saw, I don't know what it was from it. Maybe he was just battling injuries and kind of shown. But to me, I would make it a priority to sign Waller. And I don't know if that means in the middle of the season, in the beginning of the season or in the middle of the season, but he's a core player. You want to lock up guys like this and you want them to be happy. You don't want guys, especially on a team like this that stuck together through all those things last year. And now he sees guys, RJ, and so do you guys know. I mean, when's the last time the Raiders kept their own? When's the last time they signed, quarterbacks back or Hunter Renfrow back? They don't do this that often. So I think it shows not only
they have cash now.
Yeah, Darren Waller and his camp, the the kind of respect that he deserves, but I also think it shows other players that maybe are on the roster now, or maybe will sign in the future, to say like the Raiders are a team that's going to, value my work and do it. So I think Waller is an important piece of this team. Josh McDaniels is salivating at the thought of matching up Darren Waller, especially with Devontae Adams on the other side. So I think he's a big part of it. I don't think you'll get it. I don't think you'll see it before training camp is over, but maybe during the year they can come to some type of agreement and say, we want to keep you here long term, because I think he's that important to this team.
I really do think it's going to be later in this year, if it's going to be this season, or maybe even, in the off season, simply because I don't see Ziegler being somebody who is going to tip his hand a little too early. You talk about taking care of your own all you want, but it's still a business. You still have a job to do.
Yeah.
And ultimately, there's no tight end that's up for an extension that's going to move that needle past Kittle's contract anyway. So waiting a season or a half season or whatever is not going to hurt you, because no one's going to move the mark past Kittle anyway. So that mark, that 15 mil a year is already set. So it's not going to move. It's not going to go anywhere in a year.
He's also approaching, and business-wise, I know Raider fans probably don't want to hear it, but he's approaching 30 years old. You want to make sure that he comes back strong this year, stays healthy, and proves that he's still one of the best players. Because, as you guys know, bodies break down and stuff like that. I have no doubt that he will, but you want to make sure that this guy's going into his prime now. He kind of started late, obviously, with all the addiction stuff. So I think he's really hitting his stride. And like I said, I think in this Josh McDaniels offense, he's always going to get his catches because Carr loves him on third down, loves him to move the sticks. But I think this is the year we see the Darren Waller explosion with touchdowns, because the red zone has been the hard part for this team for so long. I think with McDaniels and what he's bringing in, I think you'd see a lot more Darren Waller TDs in the red zone, especially.
Well, he's also going to find the matchups and put Waller in positions to succeed. He's not like we talked about this all the time, RJ. He's not like a Gruden that's going to say, well, I don't have a play that does specifically that. This play is close. We'll just run this. It's like, no, dude, just fucking draw one up on your goddamn hand. Like, you just do that. Put him in the position. Find a guy. A DB gets hurt on the other team, and they got a backup in there. Just throw Waller at him entire. Like,
Yeah,
so,
and to your point too, they do have money to play with right now. I know Ndamukong Suh, RJ and I were talking about this off the air. The Ndamukong Suh factor, you want that bully in the middle. I think as we get closer to training camp here, you want to kind of keep a little cash in your pocket too, just in case there's some injuries or some things come up that you didn't, someone gets dangled in the trade market.
Surprise cut.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to see how some of these position battles break out in camp, and then maybe have some cash to go out there and do some things. Gives you some flexibility heading into training camp, because they're playing the first preseason game versus the Jaguars. They're going to have an extra load on them. So even though the starters probably won't play, I'd like to keep that in the back of the pocket a little bit.
Eddie's been watching my show, because that's exactly what I said. You don't use this money this year when you don't have to sign the guy. It's silly. You use the money to get.
RJ wants to go all in, baby, all in. Let's go.
Like,
RJ would get everybody
common sense and arithmetic too, Soto. Wow, real cutting edge takes there, Soto. Don't spend money we don't have to. Wow.
Let me give Derek Carr everything, even though he wasn't signed for it. Let me just give him extra money because goddamn angel.
So you've been at SiriusXM NFL for 15-ish years now, right?
NFL probably closer to about 12 years. I was there for a long time.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I made you sound older than you were. Of all the hosts that have gone through there, which one were you like, all right, this dude is not going to pan out. He's so boring. And then he shows up and you're like, wow, this guy's great. I'm glad we got him.
It's funny you say that. There's a couple guys that kind of come to mind. It's two. One of them is an executive type deal. One of them is Bill Polian. And the reason I say Bill Polian,
all right,
and then I'll give you a player one after that. Bill Polian has that kind of monotone type of deal where you're like, all right, it's going to be super boring. I can listen to Bill Polian talk, and maybe it's just the historian, aspect of it. You're like, oh my God, he goes on these 10-minute diatribes, and this, and you guys know this in the radio world. You're like, oh my God, please stop talking. But for him, it was always like, keep talking more, keep saying things, keep talking. And he was so entertaining in some of his stories, and I just ate up all the stories. And the other guy is Brett Favre. Favre, even though he wasn't doing big shows for us, he was only doing an hour. Favre always had the name cachet, and you always saw him on those documentaries and the football live stuff. He's always joking around, goofing around. But the dude loves football, and his interviews and the way people gravitate towards him, it's incredible. So those are the kind of the two guys where I thought they might not be long for this radio stuff, and they they both kind of made careers out of it.
I was going to say, there's no way, when you said Brett Favre, there was no way you're going to say, like, he showed up early to every production meeting. He had a pile of notes.
He's not going to any host workshops.
You know there was none of that. No. He's just a natural.
He's still Brett Favre, and he's still got that way about him. He's big into bike riding now. He's got a different life he had now. But yeah, there's definitely he was one of those guys when the lights came on, he kind of really turned on. The one, I don't know if I want to go down this road that I thought.
You're gonna say Rich Gannon, aren't you?
Listen, Cannon's my guy. I can't say nothing about
Rich Gannon.
No, the one that Raider fans will love, the one guy that I thought was going to be bad and turned out that he really wasn't good, was Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was early on in my career back then when I was doing shows, and Jerry, as awesome of a player as he was, the best of all time, just radio wasn't his thing. So he was a guy that it was definitely a struggle at times, even though it was awesome to work with him because he's freaking Jerry Rice.
Dude, he took a picture with Devontae Adams recently. Man, that guy looked good. He looked bigger. He looked bigger than Devontae.
Jerry is the ultimate athlete. He's still running. He's still doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, he's got the commercials with Brett Favre. You see, he wears those metal things on him. That gives him like bionic speed. What the hell he is?
The copper shit or whatever the hell that is.
The copper fit. There you go. Nah, Jerry's
before we let you get out of here, with the Raiders now in Vegas, it just makes it so easy to want to visit them. But they have an awesome road schedule as far as just like games you want to go to. New Orleans, Nashville, twice in LA, Seattle. Like there are some awesome games. If there's one, you can only go to one game next season, Eddie. Which one would it be? And it could be because of the city. It could be because of the matchup. It could be because you think it's going to be like winner goes to the playoffs. Which game? You only go to one.
It's the
Hall of Fame game, Jaguars.
Yeah, seriously. I'm torn here, to be fair, because Nashville is probably my favorite city in the United States.
Either that or Austin.
Yeah, Austin's also awesome. So Nashville is such a cool venue. You get to go there early on, so the weather won't be super crappy. But I'm going to go nostalgic, even though they're not the same team without Big Ben. I would say at Pittsburgh, the day before Christmas. The Steelers, even though Mitch Trubisky's the quarterback, they're probably still going to be in the AFC mix. It's going to be, it's the 50th anniversary of the Cat. Like you have so much history between those two teams, and the weather's going to be crap, even though it's probably bad for the Raiders. So that's like kind of my thing, like the history of the game, old school matchup, Raiders Steelers, and I think a day before Christmas, late in the season, probably two teams vying for playoff spots in the AFC. I think if I had to go to one, I think it would be Pittsburgh.
I don't feel like there's a team that can appreciate the history of its franchise better than Raider fans. Like you're way too young to remember the Steelers rivalry. Like it didn't exist when we were like.
But I'm a Raider fan because of watching NFL films and watching John Facenda talk about the Raiders Steelers matchup and seeing Jack Tatum go after Lynn Swann. Like I'm a fan of this team because of those matchups. Every time I pass the Franco Harris statue in the Pittsburgh airport, I give it the finger. Like I'm still like that's me, man. So like I love this football team because of the long storied history. And Raiders Steelers, there's nothing more important than, especially back in the day, than that rivalry back in the 70s, even though the Steelers got the best of them the most. But if you are not a fan of history and the Raiders, then you're not a fan of football because take the last 20 years out of it. Before that, the Raiders were a major part of what the NFL and the AFL is today. So if you're not a fan of history, you're definitely not a Raider fan. You got to be involved.
Pittsburgh was one of mine because they like doing the French fries and gravy inside the sandwich.
Yes.
Which is always a plus.
I'm not a big fan of that, man. It gets soggy. It gets real soggy.
You got to have a good base, man. You got to elbows out. You got to have that good base.
You got to wolf it down your throat like a pelican, like Soto, to not let it get soggy.
Listen,
like that's the key. If you eat it like a gentleman
beers before it too.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you think what do you think in the draft when it was the Raiders pick coming up and they bring out Franco Harris?
Dude,
I thought that was
and it's the best because this is the last draft that I worked for NFL Radio, and they were like, "You get Franco off the stage, please." And I'm like, "Could I go out there and just be like, Franco, get the hell off the stage? You didn't catch that ball. Get off the stage and stop taking away from the thunder of this." But yeah, like it's little stuff like that kind of makes it cool, and especially we're 50 years later, I'm still talking about it. So I think that's going to be an electric. It's going to be an electric type atmosphere in Pittsburgh, to say the least. Even if the Steelers are not the same Steelers team without Big Ben.
My second favorite time watching NFL films is remembering how you could like a DDT was a legal tackle back then. Like, unless you literally pulled out a shank and stabbed somebody in the chest, like,
Dude,
whatever contact you made was totally fine.
Talk about the Steeler Raider rivalry. Like, Mel Blount literally picked up Cliff Branch and literally gave him like the tombstone, like in the middle of the field, and there was no penalty called. Like, those are the things back in the day that a lot of the purists miss about pro football, but you don't get that nowadays. He literally picked up, and it was the referees just looked at him like, okay, cool, like, next play, let's go. I'm like, okay, that's
now if you fart next to Tom Brady, it's 15 yards.
I saw Matt Millen grab a guy, which would be a horse collar right now, and slow him down and club him across his face. That was the tackle.
It's a good old days.
Hockey fight technique, but it was a
good old
tackle.
Good old days. I know.
That was great. His name's Eddie Borsilli. You can catch him on the Yards Per Attempt podcast. 13-ish years at SiriusXM NFL. Now he's at SiriusXM Fight Nation. Eddie, this is great. Thanks for coming on, bud.
It's a pleasure, guys. I had a lot of fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Done. Congratulations for making it all the way to the end of our video. If you want Darren Waller to catch 20 touchdown passes next season and for Max Crosby to have 30 sacks, go ahead and subscribe and click the next video.